Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Kiyan.
And this is Triple Play, that podcast where we murder all of our opponents to win. Because this month we watched the Star Wars Prequel Trilogy, which is episodes 1, 2, and 3, in case you didn't know.
Written by George Lucas and Jonathan Hale.
They were all directed by George Lucas.
And released in 99, 2002, and 2005.
Pretty consistent 3-year release schedule they got going on there.
Pretty messed up how Disney isn't following that. Honestly, not even worth watching the new Star Wars movies. All true Star Wars movies are in trilogies and come out 3 years apart from each other.
I don't even think the first trilogy came out.
No, it did. It was 77, 80, and 83. And this one replicated that. And then now they just threw that all out.
Yeah, because you can make movies quicker now.
And they realized they could just totally cash in on Star Wars by making one per year.
They also realized that they didn't need George Lucas slowing everything down. So they released the shackles of Lucasdom. Anyway,
that's another podcast for another time.
Yeah, probably in a year. The prequel trilogy. Whoopee.
Well, how many times have we seen this? I've seen each of these more than 20 times. I don't think as much as I have seen the original trilogy, but probably between 20 and 30.
I think I've seen these 3 times, the second time of which was this last December, so I've seen these rather recently before I watched them for this podcast. Which kind of made it worse, honestly.
I'll just say right off the bat that I actually like this trilogy.
That's garbage. That's a garbage opinion. You should feel ashamed.
I think it's pretty good. 2 is definitely the worst. 2 is
a bad movie.
Yeah, 2 is pretty bad. I like 1 and 3.
1's
I've always
too.
liked 3. 1 has grown on me a lot over the years.
I like 3.
Which is kind of weird because I disliked 1 as a kid, but like it now.
I like 3. I've always liked 3.
Yeah, so have I.
But the first 2, I think, are just disasters.
Well, we can talk about that more when we talk about how it worked as a trilogy.
Anyway, George Lucas canceled his sequel trilogy, 7, 8, and 9, sometime in the 80s. Which is kind of weird when you think that they were named episodes 4, 5, and 6, and he just wasn't going to make the prequel trilogy first to fill out those numbers.
Well, he had written enough Star Wars stuff, apparently sometime in the 70s for like 12 movies. He had the whole backstory planned out. He had the whole sequel trilogy planned out, I guess. And obviously, what he planned out for these movies, the prequel trilogy, and eventually what would be the sequel trilogy, aren't what gets on screen, really, but... Yeah.
No, might be a pretty good thing. Remembering his first draft of New Hope, which was just a ripoff of Kurosawa, so...
Yeah, he ripped off a lot of things to make Star Wars.
So anyway, apparently these 3 movies were all self-financed by George Lucas.
You can do that when you are the creator of Star Wars.
The only company that was involved formally in the production was Fox, and only because George Lucas needed them to distribute the film.
Yeah.
So, episode 1 begins production.
Might be why this trilogy is, not in hindsight, but in watching it again, more enjoyable than episode 7.
I strongly disagree with that statement. I strongly disagree with that.
Honestly, the more I watch this trilogy, the more I just think George Lucas is just a genius. And the original trilogy, for that matter.
I think he's a genius story-wise. I don't think he can direct at all. In fact, I think he should have stayed away from directing these 3 movies, and they could have actually been good.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. So a lot of people say, like, if he didn't direct and if someone just cleaned up the script a little bit, these would be really good.
It's actually painfully obvious watching the documentary I did about episode 1 that is entirely the case. Because I watched a documentary about episode 1 called The Beginning, the making of Star Wars episode 1. It's on Star Wars' official YouTube channel if you want to watch it. It was released with The Phantom Menace on Blu-ray, I think. And it's basically, it's shot kind of like found footage style, so it's a lot of just footage of behind the scenes kind of things.
Jesus.
Feels very much like a disaster movie. Like everything is just going wrong
because
that's the way it's editing.
Episode 1, it did. No.
Yeah, it did. But yeah, watching it, you can see there are a lot there are a lot of people who, when George Lucas leaves the frame, they're like really passive aggressive about how he's kind of ruining the movie, but they have to go along with what he's doing because one, he's financing the movie, and two, he's directing it.
Well, yeah, you know what I'm going to say. I actually love episode 1, so I'm glad that he was kind of in charge there. So
it's so bad. We cast... Okay, so one of the first scenes in this documentary, and one of the most critical things in episode 1 is the casting of Jake Lloyd as young Anakin. And when you watch the footage, because they show the auditions of 2 other kids, one of whom is vastly superior to Jake Lloyd, and then they show you the scene where George is like, I think we should cast Jake. I think he's the best one. I think he's got the acting chops, and I think he's like just straight up the one who embodies Anakin. And then George Lucas leaves the room, and when he leaves the room, the casting director is like, George is completely wrong on this. He's not the best one at all, but I guess we're casting Jake.
Well, the casting director, I forgot her name, but she was casting director on all 3 of these, had some pretty other controversial opinions once we get to episode 2 and Hayden Christensen, or however you pronounce his name, gets cast.
Yeah, we'll get there. That's the correct pronunciation. But yeah, the one boy who everyone's like, he's the best, he looks almost the same as Jake, and he can actually act. And George is like, no, we're casting Jake.
Yeah, that's kind of what George Lucas does and is known for doing.
Anyway, so they cast a lot of other people. They cast Ewan McGregor, who at the time wasn't not as big as Liam Neeson.
Well, because this made him sort of big.
Actually, what made Ewan McGregor big was Trainspotting.
Well, and this. And this. You have to admit, this.
Kind of.
Well, maybe once we get to episode 2.
In America, yeah. In the UK, he was mostly known for Trainspotting because that was a UK film. That was like a pretty... I feel like a pretty big moment in British cinema was Trainspotting.
I don't know anything about that movie.
I haven't seen it, but I know the reputation it has behind it.
Well, like the original trilogy, this was sort of a mix of like a few well-known actors, but then mostly not very well-known actors.
Yeah, I mean, well, Liam Neeson was...
Yeah, Liam Neeson, Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
And then there were people who like started their career with this, like...
who ended their career with this,
and people who ended
Jake Lloyd.
their career with this. Hayden Christensen hasn't done really anything noteworthy since this either. But, well, since 2 and 3, I guess we're still just talking about 1. But apparently, since Phantom Menace was probably, I'm just going to say this after reading a lot about it, probably the most anticipated movie ever.
Perhaps.
It's either this or maybe episode 7. But I want to say it's this because Star Wars had a way better reputation before episode 1 came out.
But I want to say it's episode 7 though, because of the bad reputation from episodes 1, 2, and 3. People were more excited about there actually being a good Star Wars movie.
But they didn't know it was going to be good.
Reviews dropped 2 weeks before the movie came out.
That doesn't mean that you're going to like it when you go see it.
I mean, yeah, but it gives you a general consensus on whether or not it's going to be good.
Yeah, but general consent, no, because it's all just opinion. So you don't know if you're going to like it.
I mean, yeah, it's all opinion, but if the general flow is that more people like it than not, then you're more likely to like it. Not necessarily you will like it, but you're more likely to.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, though. Plus, it had been way long. Between 3 and 7 was only 10 years. Between 6 and 1 was like 16. So
perhaps
there's that, too.
Yeah, but
I know,
but the hype wouldn't have been building for 16 years. People would have only started getting excited 3 years before the movie came out. So I feel like the length of time is kind of irrelevant.
No, I don't think so.
Because no one would have known episode 1 was being made when episode 6 finished.
Yeah, but they're like, man, it's been almost 20 years since a Star Wars movie. Can't wait to see this new Star Wars movie. What do they have up their sleeves? That original trilogy was pretty dang good. Rather than it's been 10 years, I kind of like the originals, I kind of like the prequels, or I hated the prequels. Disney's making one a year, let's see what happens.
I disagree. I think episode 7 was a lot more anticipated than episode 1.
I don't know.
Especially since the age gap the year gap could even work against the episode 1 argument, because the 20-year gap means that a lot of the people who were excited for episode 1 never saw the originals in theaters, so there was really no reason for that gap to exist to them because they would have seen it on home video. Yeah. Whereas the 10-year gap, a lot of the people who saw 7 might have seen 3 in theaters. Yeah,
but that's also true for like kids who are watching 7 off of like Clone Wars and Rebels, so there's that. But we can argue in circles for as long as we want, but we should probably just get on with it.
Anyway, George Lucas ruined Star Wars.
But as far as casting went, apparently, I wish I remember this person's name, but the casting director got a lot of unsolicited visitors to her home requesting casting in Star Wars. She had a skywriter, a guy who wrote, like, cast me in Star Wars, like, you know, with the plane and stuff. A guy showed up in a hazmat suit, I think, asking to be cast in Star Wars. And there was this article on Star Wars' official site from like 1999 about this, and it ended with like, if you want to be in a Star Wars movie, remember that these are all working professionals, and you need to build up your acting career and either go to acting school or get some work under your belt and go through an agent.
Or just be blindly lucky, like Jake Lloyd.
Yeah.
There's a shot in the documentary where you see Jake Lloyd's agents and family, and there's like 7 people standing there, and like 3 of them are agents. I'm like, why do you need 3 agents when you're like 7 years old?
Maybe that's why, because he's underage. So apparently Jake Lloyd was kind of a menace on set.
I'm not surprised.
Well, one of the reasons like George Lucas has given, I don't know if it's true or not, for casting him, is that he embodies like the mischievous and wanting to mess with things nature of Anakin, which probably isn't the best for a work environment.
No, I really don't think it is.
Well, we should also mention that in the original, one of the original drafts, or probably a lot of the original drafts, Anakin was 12 rather than 9.
That would have been a lot better, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, there was a specific reason why Lucas gave for aging him down, but I don't remember what it is. And I think it's not because George Lucas just likes younger characters. Oh, I think that's true. I do think he just likes kid or teenage characters, because Star Wars is all about teenage characters. So
yeah, but Luke's like 18.
Yeah, well, it's still a teenager.
I mean, yeah, so is 12.
No, not really. There's no teen in the teenagers, like 13 to 19.
Okay, well, yeah, 12 is a lot closer than 9, though.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, Star Wars revolves around kids and teenagers, which
Star Wars revolves around the Skywalker family.
Yeah, but the main cast is like,
the main cast in
I'm not defending making him a 9-year-old.
2 of the movies are teenagers. Like by episode 5, Luke is 20-something, and by episode 2,
that's what I mean.
Anakin's like
and early 20s.
Almost 20.
And early 20s. I can still consider that teenage, you know what I mean, like young-ish. Even Leia and, well, maybe not Han, but...
Yeah, Han's pretty old. Obi-Wan's pretty old.
It's still, the whole cast even in the new trilogy, like Finn, Rey, Kylo.
I mean, they feel like 20s, though.
To me, not to me. Not to me.
They feel like 20s to me.
Well, I guess it's just a matter of opinion, but to me, it's always been about, like, kids. Not to the extent that one is, because Anakin's literally, like, not even 10, but yeah. Not defending their choice of casting him or making the main character a 9-year-old, but I'm just putting it out there that, like, it's always the case that they're young.
Young-ish.
Young-ish. Not as young, but yeah.
Anyway.
Weirdly enough, a lot of sources say that Obi-Wan is the main character of this, and I know it was a big deal before the movies came out, like, oh yeah, it's going to be the prequel trilogy, and Obi-Wan's going to be the main character, and they're like, haha, nope, it's actually Anakin, which is probably a more interesting idea, to be honest, because you see his downfall. But
I disagree. I think Obi-Wan would have been a more interesting character to follow.
Well, we can discuss that when we discuss, again, how it worked as a trilogy, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah, a lot of sources list, Ewan McGregor first, and call Obi-Wan the main character, and
he's kind of
Hayden
the best actor in these 3 movies.
I guess.
Gives consistently the best performance.
Yeah, pretty much. They list Natalie Portman, obviously, and Hayden Christensen, surprisingly, as supporting characters. Whereas I always saw Anakin as the main character of this.
I mean, yeah, trilogy. He is, in the final products anyway.
But it's kind of weird that they would still list them that way.
Well, I mean, apparently George Lucas was shooting without a script, much in the same way that apparently Alien 3 was doing it. He was kind of writing the final drafts of the script while they were shooting, so that's very interesting. Apparently, they had a lot of trouble with figuring out budget-wise the first movie, because George Lucas had all these ambitious ideas, and all of his producer buddies were like, at ILM were like, you're going to need a lot more money to do a lot of these things.
Well, in another sense, they were able to do a lot more because of technology. So,
yeah, to an extent. But they also did a lot of on-location shoots. but then also a lot of CG backgrounds. Like a lot of the pod race scene is basically actually all CG, including the backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
They did go back to Tunisia for Tatooine.
There was actually a massive storm in Tunisia the one night they were filming, and it destroyed all of their props that they had set up. Liam Neeson's beard went missing in the storm, like it got swept away by the winds
off his
or something.
face. No, I'm just kidding.
One of the pods got completely wrecked, and they had to rebuild it. Apparently, it was a massive disaster. It put them back like a day or two filming-wise because they had to rebuild and recollect a lot of the pieces of the sets from the storm. It went from like 135 in the day to storming in the evening. That's what you get for filming in a desert, so kind of have to expect that to happen.
Yep. They also got a lot of the actors from the original trilogy back. Not a lot, but...
Well, they got Frank Oz back.
Yeah.
It's Yoda.
They got what's-their-faces as 3PO and R2-D2. Kenny Baker and...
Anthony Daniels,
yeah, whatever his name is. And they got Ian McWhat's-his-face as the Chancellor.
McDermott?
I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Back as Palpatine.
I didn't know that he was the same actor. I never actually knew that. I never knew that until now.
Yeah, I knew that since I first watched episode 1, because I think I went and looked it up. I was like, same actor.
I mean, that's pretty much the way you would find out, is by looking it up.
He also looks extremely similar, so...
Yeah, I just thought he was a really similar-looking guy. There was a lot of work done on the wildlife for this movie, which is pretty cool, in my opinion. They designed more than what you see in the movie. We can talk about the design aspect a little bit, too. I don't think other people are really going to agree with this, but I really think it's a cool thing that they designed entire food chains and designed like all these animals and how they work in the ecosystems for Naboo and all that. Even Tatooine.
Jeez.
I thought that was pretty cool, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of neat, I guess.
They made decisions like, I don't know if this is exactly like what they did, but they made the kind of decisions like the animals on Tatooine would be more lumbering because they'd have to store water because they wouldn't have access to it. The ones on Naboo could be more agile. That's not exact, but those kinds of things. They had it all written out, which I think is pretty awesome.
I mean, it's kind of cool, but none of it comes across
it doesn't,
on screen,
I still think it's kind of cool.
So...
But these movies did have pretty cool alien and world designs. I really liked them.
Yeah, a lot of the aliens they had remote control sections in their face, so their mouths moving are people actually standing off camera with like a remote control moving little levers to move the mouth, which is why sometimes it looks like the mouth completely doesn't match what they're saying at all. It's because it's some guy trying to approximate the movements off screen with a remote control. Yeah,
the Trade Federation guys are like the biggest offenders of that. And, ever since I was a kid, I always thought it was some sort of racial thing, right? Because they sound like East Asians. We can get into the
There's a lot of kind of weird racial controversy around a lot of weird racial things going on in the first movie, especially.
Yeah. Which, since we're already talking about it, might as well just talk about it now. A lot of people see the characters as stereotypes, so like we mentioned, the Trade Federation guys are like East Asian-ish. Yeah. Watto
is like a
Jewish stereotype.
Jar Jar is
like a minstrel stereotype, which that Jar Jar was actually interesting because George Lucas is like, of course he's not a minstrel stereotype, but then some other person, I forget who it was, but some other person who worked on the movie was like, yeah, we had minstrel stereotypes in mind when we created Jar Jar. Pretty much flat out said it, so I'm inclined to think that he's not lying and that George Lucas is.
Yeah, George Lucas is doing damage control.
Yeah.
He's doing the David Fincher thing.
Well, not even damage control, because it didn't specifically come out. It's just that he's saying like, nope, didn't happen.
My favorite quote from the documentary is George Lucas going, Jar Jar is the key to all of this.
Well, the code name for like episode 2 was like Jar Jar's Revenge or something like that, but for Jar Jar, in terms of the casting, the guy who plays him was only supposed to do the voice, and he just stood in.
That's actually not true.
What?
That's actually not true at all. The original plan was for him to be in a suit, and they were only going to CG the head.
Well, where did you read that?
I watched it in the documentary.
Well, I don't...
With footage.
I don't know. I don't know who to believe then.
No, because there's a scene they showed George Lucas the side-by-side CG comparisons of the guy in the suit and another guy. Maybe they got someone else to voice Jar Jar, but the guy cast for Jar Jar in the suit plays Jar Jar in every single scene, and the plan was to only CG a Jar Jar head on top of the actor's head. But they discovered it was less man hours and cheaper to just full CG Jar Jar and use the actor's performance as a reference.
Yeah, but what I was gonna say was he was originally gonna do the voice, but eventually they just got him to act the part.
Maybe that's true. I don't know. But
I don't think we're talking about the same thing. Because
perhaps.
he was originally gonna stand in and do the voice, and they were gonna get someone else to act as Jar Jar and dub over this guy's lines, but he just eventually played the entire part.
I don't know if the same guy was in the suit voiced, so I just know there was a guy in the
Yeah,
suit
no,
and they were going to
we're not
CG
talking
his
about
face.
the same thing. Yeah.
So they had a lot of arguments about that too, whether they're going to do full CG Jar Jar or just CG head. And George was like, no, we'll do it in the suit. And then they're like, it's cheaper to do full CG Jar Jar.
So there you go.
They had to get him in for reshoots just alone in a warehouse wearing a mocap suit. Apparently they took over the Rolls-Royce factory to build all the sets and worked in 3 shifts a day, 8-hour shifts to build sets, like all day for 3 months to build everything.
Nice.
So that was interesting.
Jar Jar is an extremely controversial character, but I like him. I think he's a good part of the movie.
I don't.
He's just a funny guy.
I don't think he needs to be there.
Nobody needs to be there. They could all just go home and the galaxy would be at peace.
They should.
Kind of a jerk when he becomes a chancellor, though.
A senator?
Yeah, senator,
With
my bad.
Chancellor Jar Jar.
Would have worked out for the better.
Probably not.
Anyway, anything else of note for these movies? The guy who plays Darth Maul is Toad in X-Men. That's kind of cool.
The first scene shot was Darth Maul talking with Palpatine on the balcony of the palace.
That's not his voice though. Some other guy dubbed over his lines because apparently he has a really squeaky voice. That's what I read.
The final scene shot, I don't remember what it was. I remember seeing it in the documentary. I don't remember what it was. I remember the final scene.
When they actually killed Liam Neeson.
No, they actually filmed that pretty early, and it's they actually went through.
Yeah, they filmed actually killing him pretty early.
Yeah,
he's actually not in any movies after this.
There's
it's a whole conspiracy.
When Obi-Wan jumps up onto the ledge, they couldn't figure out. He's hanging from the ledge, and he jumps back onto the ledge. They were trying to figure out how to make it look like he wasn't just jumping off of something, because they used a trampoline at first, and George was like, yeah, you could definitely tell he's just jumping off something. So they had him stand on a plank of wood that a bunch of people held, and then when he was supposed to jump, they all launched him upward. So that was pretty interesting, too.
I saw footage, because a lot of the things one of the things they wanted to do was make, like, better lightsaber fights, because if you watch the lightsaber duels from the original trilogy, well, episode 4, they're literally just standing there. The one in episode 5 is pretty good, but they wanted to make them a lot better and more actiony here, so a lot of the actors studied martial arts and stuff. But one thing that they did was they didn't think that wire work would look realistic and achieve the effect of like the actors doing martial arts and stuff like that, so they used hydraulic systems. And I watched some footage of this. I didn't watch it too intently, honestly, but from what I could tell, the actors weren't wearing any kind of protective equipment or wires or harnesses or anything. They're just standing on like this hydraulic springboard that would spring them up like 10 feet in the air, and they just try and land it.
Oh, geez. I saw some interesting footage of apparently at least Ewan McGregor and whoever played Darth Maul actually learned the choreography for the lightsaber battle, and they're actually going as fast as they did in the movie.
Well,
and they fought with metal poles, and it's actually kind of cool to see how fast they're doing this choreography.
Well, the guy who plays Darth Maul is just a stunt actor. He's not really an actor. He's just a stunt man. So.
But yeah, Ewan McGregor actually learned the choreography. Nice. I don't know about Liam Neeson, but yeah, there's a shot where Ewan McGregor's practicing with just a metal pole against another guy with a metal pole, and they're not wearing any protective gear either. And I'm like, you get whacked by that metal pole, that's going to be pretty painful, even if it's just aluminum.
What was that viral video from like the early 2000s?
Star Wars kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, so also Ewan McGregor got to choose his own lightsaber hilt. They brought out like a box of them.
He chose the worst one. Actually, no, Qui-Gon's is the worst lightsaber in the
I don't know if you saw some of the
movies.
other choices that Ewan McGregor had, and he's like...
I didn't, but Qui-Gon's is the worst lightsaber.
They like brought out a box of hilts, and he was like, I really like this one. And there were some interesting designs. There was one that looks like like half of Darth Maul's double-bladed one, which I thought was kind of weird. If he chose that one.
So the movie came out and made a crap ton of money.
Obviously.
Here's the thing. This is actually just vaguely related because it's Star Wars, but someone told me this when we were discussing how Disney is planning on making one Star Wars movie a year, and this was back in 2015 before 7 came out. They told me, like, as of right now, so as of 2015, if a Star Wars movie comes out, you can't not see it. Right? Like, you could, but, like, if you're a Star Wars, you're gonna go see Episode 7. That's basically what he was saying. But if they keep making one a year, it's not gonna have the same impact, and you're not gonna want to see it as much.
I mean,
unless you're a super diehard Star Wars fan.
I don't know. I think some of the movies they're making tell different stories than the whole Skywalker saga, which I appreciate because making every major event in the Star Wars universe happen because of one family to
because of the Doctor
makes the universe feel like really small,
like the Doctor Who universe.
I mean, yeah, I never claimed the Doctor Who universe was
I'm just making a joke about Doctor Who because we have a podcast about Doctor Who that you should check out called Trust Your Doctor,
which is why I liked Rogue One, because we saw something that was just the regular people in the Star Wars universe and how the Empire affects them.
Which is something they never got into actually in the original trilogy. But I think this guy who I was talking to actually still had a point, because, like, I guess I don't know how to explain it other than what I already have, but, like, if Star Wars is so big and there's not that many movies for it, there's 6, so when Episode 7 came out, I guess 6 is actually a lot, but when Episode 7 came out, like, you were gonna go see it.
I guess, but it's not like Disney's going to make one major entry every 2 years. Disney's actually said they're going to stop after Episode 9. They're just going to work on other smaller movies in the universe. They just announced an Obi-Wan movie.
What this trilogy should have been. No, actually,
yes,
I'm the one person who doesn't say that.
So, I don't know. I feel like they're trying to appeal more to the general fan base. Well, actually, they're trying to appeal to the general fan base with the 7, 8, 9 episodes, but the other ones they're trying to appeal just to the diehard fans.
You know who they're trying to appeal to? The people who like the non-George Lucas garbage that they're spewing out and calling Star Wars. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I actually like Episode 7. Haven't seen Rogue One though, but
you should watch it at least once. I don't
I'm
know.
I'm going to cave at some point.
I don't know if Rogue One necessarily is
good.
Deserves a second viewing, but I think at least once you should see it.
I'm probably going to watch it like 15 times because it's a Star Wars movie, so I've still held out until now, though, so.
Just watch it right before Episode 8.
Honestly,
Episode
we're
8
kind of...
and the Han Solo movie are coming out really close together. But anyway, back to Episode 2 now, because Episode 1's out. Episode 1 made a ton of money, and Episode 2 is
being made.
Obviously going to happen, because George Lucas pretty much announced they were doing the whole trilogy when they announced the first movie, so it's no one was surprised.
They did announce the entire thing all at once.
So Episode 2 is called Attack of the Clones, but the clones don't attack until the final 20 minutes of the movie.
That was one of the main complaints about the movie, but first I want to talk about the casting of Hayden Christensen, because seems like this casting director is doing exactly the thing that she hated that George Lucas did in Episode 1, because she's gone on record as saying as soon as Hayden Christensen walked in the room, I knew that we had found Anakin.
I mean, sometimes people do that. You just find the actor.
Yeah, but I don't know if Hayden Christensen was really Anakin.
I think he was. I don't think what he gave on screen in Episode 2 demonstrates that. But in Episode 3, you can clearly see that they made the right choice. Somewhere along the development line of Episode 2, all of his performances got cut to shreds, because in the 30 minutes of the 3-hour documentary I watched, he actually seems like a really smart guy, and he said he was trying to put a lot of nuance into his performance, but a lot of it doesn't come across on screen. And I still
think he actually did, though.
In Episode 2, not so much. I feel like a lot of it got cut to bits in the editing room in Episode 2. Forgot to mention that George Lucas likes to direct in the editing room. He'll take actors out of one cut of the scene and put it into another cut of the scene.
Yeah, and it's kind of just what he does.
There's actually a moment in Episode 3, I didn't notice it when we were watching it, but you can go... Someone's clipped out just that scene, and you can see Hayden Christensen's face morph between, because they cut 2 takes together into one scene, and you can see his face morph. I think it's either in Episode 2 or 3, I don't remember which.
Well, it has to be if it's Hayden Christensen.
Yeah, but I don't remember when it happens, so...
Yeah.
So that's kind of weird.
They went to Spain for this one.
Yeah, the
I think
the Royal
maybe they went to
Palace is in
Spain for the first one too.
Yeah,
I don't
because the
remember.
Royal Palace is in
It's
Spain.
in Naboo, but yeah.
They made a life-size model of the droid for the first movie. And I remember George Lucas showing it to Steven Spielberg, and Spielberg's like, this is going to be great. This is going to be the best new thing. And George is like, yeah, well, they get replaced with the stormtroopers, so.
Well, yeah, I don't think a lot interesting happened in the production of episode 2. It seemed like the most boring one.
There is an interesting part to episode 2 that's not necessarily related to the production of the movie itself, but episode 2 was one of the first movies shot entirely digitally with no film elements at all.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
And I remember apparently George Lucas got some flack for this because people were like, digital's not as good as film. It's not as high res, which is true in 2002. When 2000, when episode 2 was shot, digital was not as high res as film. I mean, you can't really put a resolution on film because film is practically infinite resolution, but apparently that also led to a lot of problems when they were filming because digital cameras at the time were bigger than film cameras. They were more expensive and they had bigger lenses, and getting the right lens for the shot became really difficult because there were digital cameras, and finding lenses for digital cameras at the time was really difficult. Now almost every film is shot on digital because you can shoot on digital up to 4K resolution and almost 8K even sometimes, so film is practically non-existent in movies now.
Episode 2 also has CG Yoda.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they tried to do with the CG Yoda is try and replicate the puppet's movements, which, yeah, kind of weird, but I can see where they're coming from because they said, I forget who said this, but someone said, if we don't make it look similar to how the puppet, it's not going to look like Yoda. Not even just look, but like how he moves and stuff like that. But then they can also do a lot more with the computer images. So
yeah, the computer Yoda looks kind of
he looks weird. He looks weird in episode 2 especially.
Yeah.
And honestly, even the puppet from episode 1 looks kind of weird in comparison to the original one. Maybe this is just some stupid thing where it's actually the same puppet and we're just
I don't think it is either. Puppet.
But his eyes look a lot wider in episode 1 than I remember them ever getting in but maybe that's just because like Dagobah has like low light actually it would be the opposite. If he had low light, he would open his eyes wider. Yeah. So, I don't know.
Also, apparently, back to the digital thing, every single frame in episode 2 has a digital effect of some kind.
Yeah.
Whether it be a blue screen effect or a CG creature, every single frame.
There's one scene that doesn't. I forget which one it was, but there's one scene that was in episode 1 actually, because episode 1 is the same thing. Yeah. Episode 1 has one scene with no digital effects.
Yeah, episode 2, every single frame has a digital effect. At least according to the guy in the documentary. He might be lying to me.
Yeah, that's the thing, because when you look at the production of movies, some people who work closely together have completely different stories. I'm not just talking about these movies, but just in general, sometimes people have completely different stories about what happened. That's why I always take everything with a grain of salt, or just completely believe the first thing I read and disregard everything else and throw it in the trash. Another interesting thing about episode 2 is Mace Windu, or Samuel L. Jackson specifically requested that Mace Windu have a purple lightsaber.
And George Lucas approved it, which is kind of amazing because I would have thought George Lucas would have been really set on the whole blue-green for good guys, red for bad guys thing.
Maybe he was like, well, Windu isn't really a good guy or a bad guy, which, I don't know.
The in-universe explanation is that Mace Windu channels his anger when he fights, which is why his lightsaber is purple, because he kind of channels his anger through the light side.
Huh.
That's what I read anyway, in the convoluted expanded universe nonsense.
Yeah, that might have been thrown out by Disney, because they threw out everything.
Which I liked, honestly, because there was so much. Not that I read any of it.
I really don't care. I'm kind of over Star Wars, too, at this point.
I also remember hearing that Mace Windu, the character, has a really unique fighting style. Apparently, the choreographer of episode 2 tried to give each Jedi their own kind of unique fighting style, and Samuel L. Jackson, because he'd watched a lot of samurai films, wanted to incorporate that into his fighting style, so his fighting style is a lot more samurai influenced than some of the other ones.
Most of them are samurai influenced or kendo influenced.
Yeah, so episode 2
came out, made a lot of money.
Oh yeah, apparently including Jango Fett was almost entirely a marketing decision because they were like, Boba Fett was really popular. Let's include Django.
Well, it's a nice touch because you get to see the origins of Boba and Django and find out that he was the clone model guy.
And you also get to find out that he has a family history of dying really easily.
Yeah. Well, Boba Fett's actually not dead, but yeah, I always thought, I don't know what put this idea in my head. Maybe I read some misinformation or maybe I just made it up. I always thought the guy who played Django was the actual father of the guy who played Boba, but he's not. The guy who played Django, interestingly, is the dad of Moana in Moana.
That is actually interesting.
They're both from New Zealand, though. And the kid who played Boba now lives in which is like 2 minutes away from here.
Man, we could go say
We should have gotten an interview with him. I don't think he acts anymore. Similar to how I can't believe we didn't mention how Lloyd now has schizophrenia. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's getting help for it though. He's getting treatment.
According to Wikipedia, he was. I didn't look into it anymore.
Yeah, neither did I. I do know that Jake Lloyd was asked to help out with some song project of which the kid who played Boba, my mistake, was like the lead character in like this music video. So that was kind of
weird. They didn't even work together.
Yeah. The kids of Star Wars. Episode 3.
Came out, made a lot of money. Okay, no.
Yeah, episode 3 came out, made a lot of money, ended the series. George Lucas was like, I'm done.
Well, we can talk
George Lucas hasn't directed anything since episode 3, by the way, which I thought was interesting.
We can talk about the reception of episode 2, which a lot of people bashed the dialogue. A lot of people bashed the dialogue of 1, 2, and 3, and a lot of it is kind of like, whatever to me, but it always felt to me like this was the sort of backstory of what happened before. It is the backstory of what happened before the original trilogy. Even though it's only 20 years before episode 4, or like 20 to 40 years before episode 4, it always felt like this grander time. You know, the Jedi are still around. It feels more ancient. So I'm okay with sort of the more flowery and like Shakespearean old sounding dialogue that doesn't sound completely natural. Especially because like people gave the dialogue flack for not sounding natural. I'm like, it's Star Wars. Why should the dialogue sound natural?
Well, my problem with the dialogue was that it always wasn't necessarily that it didn't sound natural, but that it sounded clunky. Like, a lot of the exposition wasn't put on screen, it was explained through dialogue, and those lines were like really clunky and long and exposition based.
Maybe, yeah. I agree with the exposition part of what you're saying, but I actually think the characterization is done more through the visuals than the dialogue. Far more. And I think that might just be a result of me picking up on things after watching these movies 20 to 30 times, or me just making things up after watching 20 to 30 times, but hey.
I think also the reason why the dialogue comes across really poorly is that because of the way George Lucas directed it, yes, I'm putting this on George Lucas, a lot of the lines sound like they're being read. Like, I feel like a lot of the dialogue would actually come out okay if the actors had just taken them and delivered them as someone would be saying them, but a lot of the lines, especially from Jake Lloyd, from Natalie Portman, from even Liam Neeson, sound like they're reading them off of paper.
Hayden Christensen is the main offender of that, in my opinion.
In episode 2, by far.
2. That's just something people have always said about George Lucas since he started directing movies. Like, you can go and look at interviews from the original Star Wars trilogy of the actors being like, the lines he writes, because there's this thing like where when you read a book, the dialogue almost never sounds natural, but you don't notice it as much and you don't really care because no one's speaking it aloud. But then when you watch a movie, especially if it's set in like the present time, it's got to sound more natural, or else you're going to really notice it.
Yeah, somebody said, I think it was Harrison Ford said, like, yeah, George, you can really type this shit, but you sure can't say it. That's why I feel like maybe even if George just had somebody else direct the dialogue and he did the visuals, because I think the visuals are fine. I think the only problem with George Lucas's directing is how he has the actors deliver his dialogue. I feel like these movies would have been better.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned before, in my opinion, a lot of the characterization is done a lot more through the visuals. So yeah, I'd say he is better at doing that. Which
is perhaps maybe why he should have had somebody else do the dialogue for him.
Or maybe just clean it up, honestly.
But anyway, episode 3, definitely the closest to the original trilogy in terms of quality, in my opinion. It's like, honestly, really close to episode 4, in my opinion.
It's pretty good. When we were watching this, because episode 3 has always been my favorite of the original trilogy, and then when we watched episode 1 for this, I was like, wow, that might overtake 3. And then when we watched 3, I was like, no, there's no way that's overtaking 3. 3 has always been pretty good and has been pretty well received, actually. People like to, remember the prequel trilogy in like a really bad light, but if you actually look at like the critical reception, which to me doesn't really mean much, and to most people probably doesn't mean much and shouldn't, but if you actually look at most people's opinions, 3 is pretty well liked.
Yeah. There are still people who just hate 3 because it's part of the prequels, which, whatever, I guess that's your prerogative, I suppose.
Well, the Grievous is like a pretty great design and cool villain.
I mean, yeah, he also
I love Grievous.
Dies really easily.
Well, he gets blaster shotted to the one part of him that'll kill him. He's freaking cool, though. Just got a fanboy about Grievous for a bit.
I mean, he is, but... what else happens behind the scenes of episode 3? Not much, because episode 3, more so than episode 2, is just a continuation of the previous movie. Episode 2 is a pretty big time skip, which is why,
They started the production of 3, like, pretty much right when they ended the production of 2.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Not that interesting of a fact, but a fact.
A fact nonetheless.
Yeah, I guess, like a lot of proven movie series, if you know what I mean, there wasn't much going on behind the scenes, like, unlike with, the first Alien maybe, or Back to the Future, which weren't necessarily like tested and nobody knew how big of a hit they were going to be, like it's Star Wars. So
yeah, George Lucas says something like that, like, oh, these are Star Wars movies, they're going to make a ton of money, but you can still mess them up.
Which, according to many people, did happen.
I mean, yeah, it did. I guess that's our segue into it.
How did it work as a trilogy? I would say almost perfectly, and almost perfectly with the original trilogy too. There's that you mentioned a lot, the like poetry quote when we were watching this, and that's like sort of a meme now, I guess. But the fact that there's so many like callbacks, references, and bits that connect this to the originals, even in like really stupid ways, I love that. I love how it's all so connected.
I mean, I like the like poetry, it rhymes, which, yeah, it's become a meme, but it's true, and it was entirely George Lucas's intention. Like, he says it when they're filming episode 1, he says, the whole scene with Anakin going into space and blowing up the droid spaceship is supposed to mirror Luke destroying the Death Star in episode 4. But I also feel like the things George Lucas did to quote-unquote rhyme it with the original trilogy may have also harmed the film, because I think a lot of the time those rhyming scenes aren't with Anakin, they're with Obi-Wan, which is why a lot of people think Obi-Wan would have been a better focus for this movie. Like, Obi-Wan going to Kamino in the second movie, that's supposed to mirror Luke looking for Yoda. Which
Luke learned from Obi-Wan, well, for like 2 minutes.
Which implies that, like, maybe Obi-Wan is supposed to be the main character of the Clone Wars movie, Attack of the Clones.
He kind of is, I mean, maybe in episode 1, but he kind of is the main character along with Anakin in 2 and 3. I mean, there are like a lot of Obi-Wan alone without Anakin scenes.
Yeah, but it's clear that Anakin's supposed to be the protagonist, and I think if they had shifted that to Obi-Wan, I think it would have worked better, because I think you could still have the father-son kind of dynamic, because Luke learns from Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan kind of shelters Luke during episode 4.
They could obviously still make Anakin a major character, and would be even if it was Obi-Wan. But I don't know, actually, because I like what was put out, and maybe I'd probably also like an Obi-Wan centric trilogy too. So
I'm actually glad they're making an Obi-Wan movie. It's the one like spin-off Star Wars movie I'm actually excited for, because I like Obi-Wan as a character.
Some interesting stuff for 3 that I just remembered, I guess, is kind of... So when they were designing Kashyyyk, all they had to go... Because George Lucas had designed or thought up a lot of these worlds, like in the 70s and stuff, but all they had to go on visually was the holiday special. So they said they watched the holiday special like 5 times in a row.
Oh, God. I feel sorry for them.
We always call this podcast like a test of patience, like, watching 3 movies in a row. But imagine watching the Star Wars Holiday Special 5 times in a row.
That could be the 0.5 for this episode.
Oh, no, it won't be. We already know what we're doing.
Yeah, it's the Holiday Special 5 times in a row. And quintuple play.
And in one of the drafts, a 10-year-old Han Solo was set to appear on Kashyyyk, but that got cut out.
It wouldn't have really made any sense either, I think.
Well, because in the old canon, before Disney threw anything out, one of the things that was really agreed upon, I think, was that Han and Chewbacca met between 3 and 4, which would make sense.
Yeah.
But if he was in 3, he would already know Chewbacca, probably, because Chewbacca's like one of the 2 named Wookiees.
What about the droid attack on the Wookiees? That's also a meme now, for some reason.
Another meme that came out of 3 was the do not want. I didn't know it was from this, actually. Did you know about that?
I didn't know it was from this either.
It's because the movie got leaked in China or on Chinese sites before it came out. And it was like dubbed in Chinese, I think, but had English subtitles.
Oh, that's right. I remember
And they
now.
translated the no, Darth Vader's no as do not want.
Anyway, back to how it works as a trilogy. I don't know. I feel like episode 2 is just a straight up bad.
It is. It's pretty unenjoyable, especially because of how long it drags out at the end.
Episode 1, they showed the reactions to the test screening in the documentary, like the executives pre-screening, the very first screening of episode 1, and a lot of the executives were like, "Your editing on this is so bonkers because you cut between so many stories so quickly." And George is like, "Yeah, well, I mean, it was designed to be that way, and I can respect that, but now that I've heard that, I actually kind of think it's true. Episode 1 jumps around a lot, especially near the end.
It does, yeah.
And maybe streamlining that even would have made it more enjoyable for me."
Maybe. I don't know. I can't say. I don't think.
I don't know.
Because I didn't have a problem with it. So.
I just don't like episode 1, really. But I can see the movie it could have been, and that makes me like it less, to be honest, because I can see what could have been there, and then I see what we got, and I'm like, we had so much potential.
Well, I like these movies more every time I watch them, even episode 2, and I still dislike episode 2. So, but I like it more every time I watch it.
I don't think episode 2 will ever be redeemed for me.
I like how Disney is kind of continuing the tradition of keeping like this tight. Star Wars is like a tight story that with a lot of callbacks and even almost kind of nonsensical things that connect the movies in episode 7, because episode 7 was kind of just episode 4 in a lot of ways.
It's like poetry, it rhymes.
Yeah, so that's one thing that I'm glad about. And yeah,
Disney is actually
I guess we can talk about 7, 8, and 9 when we eventually do those.
Yeah.
So.
Disney is actually really intent on keeping that whole rhyming thing going, even going so far as the first episode 8 trailer and the first episode 7 trailer. When you watch them side by side, the cuts to black and the cuts to color are all identical, and all the scenes that you see are very visually similar. Like the first thing you see in the episode 7 trailer is Finn sits up on the sand dunes, and the first thing you see in the episode 8 trailer is Rey waking up on the beach, on the stone island. So it's all very interconnected, which I did like about the prequel trilogy. I liked those callbacks too, so. Or those call forwards, I guess they would be.
Yeah. Well, I think it works amazingly as a trilogy, so.
I'm a little iffy on that. We'll call it mixed.
Expanded universe stuff?
Well, none of it's canon anymore, so...
No. Yeah, this is kind of expanded universe stuff, in a way.
Yeah, well, this is still considered canon.
Yeah,
movies, at least.
I'm not using expanded universe in the sense that, like, non-canon. I don't give a crap about canon, but, like, expanded upon the original thing.
That's true.
So, I guess if you use that definition, then episode 5 is expanded universe, so...
There's the Clone Wars TV show.
There's the Clone Wars original TV show, which is, I think, what we're going to do for the next episode.
There's Rebels, which takes place between 3 and 4.
Yeah,
Rogue One also takes place between 3 and 4.
I remember really enjoying the original Clone Wars cartoon, and I haven't really gotten into Clone Wars / Rebels because of the art style. It just looks terrible to me, but...
I like the art style of Clone Wars more than Rebels. Rebels is
It's kind of the same-ish.
Yeah, but
It's kinda the same.
Rebels is supposed to be more clearly influenced by the original concept drawings for Episode 4, so all the lightsabers are pencil thin. And honestly, just off-putting to me, so...
Yeah, maybe non-movie.
There's books. There's a lot of books.
Okay, whatever. I'm just going to make a general statement that non-movie animations should stick to 2D, for now at least, because no computer-animated TV shows look great.
I mean, Kung Fu Panda didn't look that bad.
Yeah, maybe that's an exception. Yeah, maybe that is just a complete wrong blanket statement, so... Anyway.
Well, that about wraps that up, I suppose. You can email us at thedoctordecadavevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, anger, rants, love letters, your thoughts on Star Wars the Prequel Trilogy. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play, all at Triple Play. Still can never get used to calling it Apple Podcasts. Leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. We're now on our other podcasts account, which is Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast. And follow us on Twitter. And next time we'll either watch the original 2002/3 Clone Wars animation or Rogue One, I guess. And the month after that we'll be watching the Insidious trilogy, I guess. Insidious 1, 2, and 3. But until then, the end.